Welcome to Sleepy Time History, where gentle voices guide you through the stories of the world, helping you drift peacefully into sleep. Tonight, we begin a slow and soothing journey through the history of Germany, a land of deep forests and rolling rivers, of timeless castles and vibrant cities, of rich culture and quiet resilience. From the earliest days when tribes roamed ancient woodlands, to the rise and fall of empires, through struggles and rebirths, we will explore the stories that have shaped this remarkable country. So, settle in, breathe deeply, and let the calm rhythm of history carry you softly into rest. Together, we'll uncover Germany's past, its people, its land, and its hopes for tomorrow. Let's begin. Long before borders were drawn or kingdoms rose, the land we now call Germany was a vast and varied expanse, filled with dense forests, wide rivers, deep valleys, and rolling hills. The soil beneath held the stories of countless lives, lived long before anyone called this place Germany. Tonight, we journey back to those earliest moments, the quiet, mist-shrouded dawn of time, to uncover the distant beginnings of this enduring land. Let your body rest gently, and let your mind begin to drift as we move softly into the ancient past. The earliest footprints. Archaeological evidence suggests that human presence in what is now Germany dates back more than 600,000 years. Among the oldest human fossils found in Europe is the Homo heidelbergensis, whose remains were discovered in the 1907 excavation of Mauer, near Heidelberg. These early humans walked upright, used basic tools, and lived in caves or near rivers. As the Ice Age ebbed and flowed, the landscape was reshaped by glaciers, leaving behind fertile plains, winding rivers, and thick forests. The people who lived here followed herds of animals and adapted to the changing climate. They hunted mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, and reindeer, crafting spears from sharpened stones and bones. It was a life of deep awareness, attuned to nature's rhythms. By around 40,000 years ago, Homo sapiens, anatomically modern humans, had reached the region. These early people brought with them art, ritual, and advanced tools. In southern Germany, near Ulm, archaeologists uncovered a remarkable figurine carved from mammoth ivory. Known as the Lion Man, it is estimated to be over 35,000 years old, making it one of the oldest known representations of a mythical creature. Its presence hints at an early spiritual imagination, stories told by firelight under stars that still shine today. The Neolithic Revolution. As time moved forward, so too did human development. Around 5500 BCE, the first signs of farming communities began to appear in Central Europe, brought in by people of the linear pottery culture. These early farmers cultivated wheat and barley, raised cattle and pigs, and lived in longhouses made of timber and thatch. They also made simple ceramics marked with linear designs, hence their name. Agriculture brought stability, and with it came settlements. Forests were cleared, rivers were tamed, and the land began to take shape beneath human hands. Along the banks of the Danube, Elbe, and Rhine, small communities grew. With permanent homes and organized labor, people began to shape their surroundings more intentionally. The Neolithic people buried their dead with care, often including tools, pottery, and ornaments in the graves, suggesting a belief in an afterlife. In some places, large stone tombs known as megaliths were built, the most famous of which are in the northwestern part of present-day Germany. Bronze Age brilliance. By 2200 BCE, the Bronze Age had arrived. This era brought metalworking skills to the people of what is now Germany. Tools and weapons made of bronze, an alloy of copper and tin, began to replace those made from stone. Trade networks expanded dramatically during this time. Amber from the Baltic coast, copper from the Alps, and tin from far-off Cornwall in Britain flowed through the region. The people of Central Europe became part of a much larger web of cultural and economic exchange. The Anetis culture, which flourished between 2300 to 1600 BCE, is considered one of the earliest Bronze Age cultures in the area. They built fortified hilltop settlements, created beautiful jewelry, and buried their elite in tumulus graves, large earthen mounds that rose gently from the land like sleeping giants. One of the most astonishing finds from this era is the Nebra sky disk, discovered in Saxony-Anhalt in 1999. This bronze disk, inlaid with gold symbols of the sun, moon, and stars, is over 3,600 years old. It is believed to be one of the oldest known representations of the cosmos and indicates that early Germanic people studied the skies, marking solstices and aligning their lives with the heavens. The mysterious Celts. As the Bronze Age gave way to the Iron Age around 800 BCE, Celtic tribes emerged across Central Europe. The Celts were not a single people, but a collection of tribal groups sharing language roots, spiritual beliefs, and artistic styles. In what is now southern Germany, the Hallstatt culture, named after a site in modern-day Austria, left behind salt mines, weapons, and finely crafted pottery. The Hallstatt Celts were followed by the Latine culture around 450 BCE, known for their intricate metalwork, swirling designs, and warrior aristocracy. Celtic settlements, called oppida, dotted the countryside. These were early proto-cities, often built on hilltops and fortified with wooden palisades. One of the largest was Huneberg, located near the Danube. It showed signs of sophisticated urban planning and long-distance trade with the Mediterranean world, including Greek ceramics. The Celts believed in a spiritual world woven through nature, gods of rivers, forests, and the sky, and held their sacred ceremonies in groves, not temples. Their druids served as priests, judges, and keepers of oral tradition. Though the Celts would later be pushed westward by incoming Germanic tribes and Roman conquest, their legacy remains etched into the foundations of Central European history. The dawn of the Germanic peoples. As early as the first millennium BCE, a new cultural identity began to emerge among the forested lands of northern and central Germany, the Germanic tribes. These groups, ancestors of many modern European populations, spoke early Germanic languages and lived in small, kin-based communities. They farmed the land, worshipped a pantheon of gods, and developed strong traditions of storytelling and oral law. Greek and Roman sources, such as Pythias and Julius Caesar, describe them as tall, fierce, and freedom-loving. To the Romans, the lands across the Rhine and Danube were mysterious and wild, home to people who would one day challenge the very heart of the Roman Empire. But before battles and borders, there was simply the forest, vast and shadowed, echoing with the footsteps of hunters, the laughter of children, and the quiet breath of time. Gentle reflections. And so, The distant beginnings of Germany were not defined by a single empire or ruler, but by the slow, steady rhythm of human life evolving through time. From the first hunter-gatherers who gazed at starlit skies, to the craftsmen who shaped bronze and stone, to the Celtic priests who whispered prayers in ancient groves, these early peoples left behind traces of wonder, mystery, and strength. The land remembers, in its rivers, its valleys, and its ancient hilltops. And tonight, as you rest in stillness, you too are connected to that long, unfolding story. Sleep peacefully, knowing the next chapter awaits, when new powers rise and invaders come from far-off lands. But for now, rest in the quiet of beginnings, where everything was new, and time moved slowly. As the morning mists lifted over the dense forests and slow-moving rivers of ancient Germany, human life continued to unfold quietly but steadily. Although no great pyramids were built here, no ziggurats or marble temples rose from the soil, this land was far from empty. Instead, it was home to sophisticated tribal cultures, unique civilizations that lived close to nature, yet deeply shaped the identity of the continent for centuries to come. Let your eyes relax and your breathing slow, as we gently return to the heart of Europe, to witness the story of the earliest civilizations to dwell in the land we now call Germany. Echoes of the Celts. Before the Romans ever set foot in the region, large parts of southern and western Germany were home to the Celts, a widespread people whose influence stretched across much of Europe. As we touched on before, the Hallstatt and Latène cultures represented two key stages of Celtic civilization. The Hallstatt culture, around 800 to 450 BCE, centered in areas now part of Austria and southern Germany, was known for its mining of salt, a valuable commodity in the ancient world. Salt preserved meat, enhanced flavor, and served as currency in some regions. This white gold funded an elite class of Celtic chieftains, who buried their dead in richly appointed tombs. In these graves, archaeologists have found iron swords, bronze vessels, amber beads, and finely worked jewelry. Horses were often buried alongside their riders, indicating status and the deep bond between warrior and steed. Following this period, the Latène culture emerged around 450 BCE and continued until the Roman conquest. Latène art, with its flowing curves and ornate metalwork, reveals a sophisticated aesthetic sense. Shields, brooches, and ceremonial helmets crafted in bronze and iron show a blending of form and function, designed for battle, but also to impress. Celtic oppida, fortified settlements like Mosching in Bavaria, functioned as early urban centers. With workshops, trade zones, and residential quarters, these oppida were bustling with activity. Traders brought in wine from Italy, glass beads from the Mediterranean, and olive oil from Iberia. In return, the Celts offered tin, amber, hides, and salt. Religion was woven deeply into Celtic life. Their belief system centered on the sacredness of nature. Groves of oak trees, springs of clear water, and mountains cloaked in mist were all thought to be the dwelling places of gods. Druids, a class of priests and scholars, passed down laws, myths, and astronomical knowledge through oral tradition, never writing it down, to preserve its power. The Germanic tribes arise. While the Celts dominated the south, new peoples emerged in the north and central parts of Germany. Around 500 BCE, the early Germanic tribes began to take shape. Unlike the Celts, who built oppida and mined salt, the Germanic peoples lived in small, agrarian communities, often along riverbanks or within forest clearings. They grew barley, raised pigs and cattle, and relied on the forest for hunting and foraging. Their homes were simple wooden longhouses, shared by families and their livestock. Life was communal, deeply rooted in seasonal cycles and kinship ties. What these people lacked in monumental architecture, they made up for with rich oral traditions and enduring social structures. Tribal chieftains governed based on consensus, with assemblies known as things or folkmoots, where free men gathered to make decisions. Justice was delivered through a system of compensation and oaths, and reputation mattered more than wealth. Roman historians such as Tacitus, writing in the 1st century CE, described the Germanic peoples as brave, independent, and loyal to their clans. He wrote of their hospitality, their fierce resistance to tyranny, and their deep connection to land and custom. Although biased through Roman eyes, Tacitus' Germania offers one of the earliest written accounts of these ancient tribes. Among the most well-known early Germanic tribes were the Suebi, Cherusci, Chatti, and Marcomanni. These groups often formed loose coalitions for defense but retained a strong sense of independence. They viewed the forest, particularly the vast Teutoburg forest, as sacred and protective, a barrier against the outside world. The coming of Rome. By the 1st century BCE, the Roman Empire had expanded northward, pressing into Gaul, modern-day France, and seeking to cross the Rhine River. Julius Caesar led campaigns against the Celtic tribes in Gaul between 58 and 50 BCE, and during this time, the first Roman encounters with the Germanic peoples occurred. The Romans called the lands across the Rhine Germania Magna, Greater Germania. While they succeeded in bringing parts of western Germany under Roman control, particularly the region known as Germania Inferior, near present-day Cologne, the rest remained fiercely independent. In 9 CE, one of the most decisive moments in ancient German history unfolded, the Battle of the Teutoburg Forest. The battle that changed everything. Led by a young Germanic chieftain named Arminius, the Germanic tribes staged a massive ambush against 3 Roman legions under General Publius Quinctilius Varus. Arminius had once served in the Roman army and knew their tactics well. Using the dense forest terrain to his advantage, he united several tribes and launched a devastating attack. The Romans, unprepared and strung out along narrow forest paths, were slaughtered over 3 days. The defeat was so shocking that the Emperor Augustus was said to have cried out, "Varus, give me back my legions." The loss halted Roman expansion east of the Rhine and set the boundary between Roman and Germanic lands for centuries. For the Germanic tribes, it was a moment of triumph, a symbol of resistance and unity in a land known for its fierce independence. Rome's shadow in the west. While Rome never fully conquered Germania Magna, they maintained a strong presence along its western border. The cities of Colonia Claudia era Agrippinensium, modern-day Cologne, Mogontiacum, Mainz, and Augusta Treverorum, Trier, became Roman outposts of trade, culture, and military strength. Trier, in particular, became one of the most important Roman cities north of the Alps. With grand bathhouses, an amphitheater, a basilica, and even an imperial residence, it was sometimes called the Second Rome. It stands today as one of Germany's oldest cities. Roman engineering left a lasting impact. Roads, aqueducts, and stone bridges crisscrossed the Rhine frontier. Temples to Jupiter and Mars stood beside local shrines to Germanic gods. Latin mixed with local dialects. A cultural blending took root, even as the political boundary between Rome and the unconquered East remained firm. Beliefs of the ancients. Both the Celts and Germanic peoples had rich spiritual traditions. The Celts, as mentioned, saw nature as divine and consulted druids for wisdom and guidance. The Germanic tribes, meanwhile, worshipped a pantheon of gods that would later inspire Norse mythology. Woden, later Odin, Donner, Thor, and Tawaz, Tyr, were powerful deities, associated with wisdom, storms, and war. Sacred groves and bogs were common ritual sites. Offerings of weapons, jewelry, and even human sacrifices have been found in the peatlands of northern Germany, preserved for thousands of years. One such site, Tolland Man, though found in Denmark, gives us a glimpse into this sacred world. The bog body, perfectly preserved, was laid to rest in a ritual act, perhaps to appease the gods or ensure a good harvest. These early belief systems taught that fate, or WYRD, governed the lives of men, and that bravery in the face of death was the highest virtue. Honor, loyalty, and memory formed the pillars of these ancient worldviews. A tapestry begins to form. By the time the Roman Empire began to decline in the 3rd and 4th centuries CE, the tribal societies of Germany had grown in strength, complexity, and cohesion. The seeds of future kingdoms were being sown. Some tribes began to migrate, seeking land, security, and new opportunities, as pressure from the east, particularly from the Huns, drove populations westward. These Völkerwanderung, or migrations of peoples, would set the stage for great changes to come. But long before those upheavals, the land we now call Germany was a mosaic of ancient cultures, Celtic and Germanic, Roman and local, each contributing a thread to the story. As you begin to drift into deeper rest, let your thoughts linger on the forest paths and torchlit oppida of ancient Germany. Picture the farmers sowing barley in the morning mist, the warriors forging iron swords, the druids whispering secrets beneath oaks. No temples of stone are needed to define a civilization. Sometimes it is the echo of ritual chants in a quiet grove, or the shimmer of gold beneath a bog, or the memory of victory carried on the wind. And so, the ancient civilizations of Germany live on, in story, in soil, and in soul. As we drift further into the early chapters of Germany's long history, the land that would one day be called Germany found itself swept up in the tides of conquest, resistance, and cultural collision. From the disciplined march of Roman legions to the thunderous migrations of tribal peoples, the Germanic lands were shaped by both the conquerors who entered and the fierce defenders who stood their ground. Let's close our eyes now and sink softly into this distant age, an era of iron swords, smoky encampments, and shifting borders, where conquest and survival danced hand in hand. Shield, the Roman arrivals. By the 1st century BCE, the expanding Roman Empire had already absorbed much of Western Europe. Julius Caesar, ever ambitious, launched military campaigns across the Rhine River, encountering fierce resistance from the Germanic tribes. In his Commentarii de Bello Gallico, Caesar refers to the region as Germania, and describes its people as hardy, warlike, and deeply tied to the land. But the Romans never fully conquered Germania. While they would establish provinces such as Germania Inferior and Germania Superior on the western fringes, modern-day Western Germany, much of the heartland, known to them as Magna Germania, remained outside their grasp. One of the most defining episodes in this struggle came in the year 9 CE, in what became known as the Battle of the Teutoburg Forest. Under the dense canopy of trees and mist, an alliance of Germanic tribes led by Arminius, a chieftain of the Cherusci who had once served in the Roman army, ambushed and annihilated 3 Roman legions commanded by Publius Quinctilius Varus. It was a stunning defeat. Some 15,000 to 20,000 Roman soldiers were lost. This battle sent shockwaves through the Roman Empire. Emperor Augustus, upon hearing the news, was said to have cried out, "Quintili ver, legions red. Quintilius Varus, give me back my legions." Rome would never again attempt to conquer the lands east of the Rhine. And so, Germany stood, not as a unified state, but as a fragmented land of tribal confederations, stubbornly outside the reach of Rome's imperial might. Bow and arrow the Germanic migrations. As centuries passed, the power of Rome began to fade, and the Germanic peoples moved. What historians once called the barbarian invasions is now better understood as a mass migration period. These weren't random waves of destruction but complex movements of entire peoples, families, elders, warriors, and children, searching for land, stability, and opportunity as Rome's hold on Europe crumbled. Between the 3rd and 6th centuries CE, many Germanic tribes played pivotal roles in reshaping the map of Europe. The Visigoths, after sacking Rome in 410 under Alaric, migrated to Hispania, modern-day Spain. The Ostrogoths carved out a kingdom in Italy. The Vandals journeyed through Gaul into North Africa, even seizing Carthage. The Franks, who would become foundational to French and German history, established a strong kingdom in Gaul. But not all moved away. Some Germanic tribes, such as the Alemanni, the Saxons, and the Thuringians, remained in Central Europe, laying the cultural groundwork for what would later be the German nation. Crossed swords, the Huns and the Shadow from the east. Amid the movements of the Germanic peoples, another force emerged, one that thundered across the steppes and sent shudders through both tribes and empires alike, the Huns. Under the leadership of the fierce and enigmatic Attila, the Huns moved westward during the 5th century, disrupting settled tribes and challenging the remnants of Roman authority. Though not native to the Germanic lands, their arrival was deeply consequential. Tribes such as the Goths were pushed further west and south, seeking refuge in Roman territories, accelerating the collapse of Roman control. Attila's campaigns even reached Gaul, where he was finally checked at the Battle of the Catalaunian Plains in 451 CE, a joint effort by Roman general Flavius Aetius and Germanic allies like the Visigoths and Franks. Though Attila's empire dissolved quickly after his death in 453, the shockwaves of the Hunnic invasion had reshaped the demographics and alliances of Europe. The Germanic tribes emerged from the chaos with new territories, new identities, and new roles. Crown the rise of the Franks. Of all the Germanic tribes that settled and expanded during this era, the Franks would become the most influential in shaping the early medieval world. By the late 5th century, A Frankish king named Clovis I of the Merovingian dynasty united several Frankish tribes and converted to Christianity, a critical turning point that would bind Germanic power to the Roman Church. Though Clovis's domain was centered in what is now France, the eastern half of his realm encompassed large portions of modern-day Western Germany, including cities like Cologne, Trier, and Mainz. This era marked the beginning of the Frankish-German identity, a cultural and political bridge between Latin Christendom and Germanic tradition. Castle Charlemagne and the Carolingian legacy. By the 8th and 9th centuries, the Carolingian dynasty had replaced the Merovingians. Its most famous ruler, Charlemagne, Charles the Great, expanded the Frankish realm into a vast empire that included much of modern Germany. In the year 800, Charlemagne was crowned Emperor of the Romans by Pope Leo III, a symbolic revival of the Western Roman Empire under a Germanic king. This coronation would form the foundation of what would later become the Holy Roman Empire. Charlemagne's empire was deeply influential. He promoted learning, law, and Christianity throughout his realm. Monasteries flourished. Latin was preserved. Trade routes were rebuilt. And though the empire fractured after his death in 814, the idea of a unified Christian Europe under a Germanic crown endured. Hammer and pick echoes of invasion and resistance. The story of conquest in Germany is never one-sided. The Germanic tribes were not only invaders of Rome but also fierce defenders of their own homelands. Whether resisting Caesar's legions, ambushing Varus in the forest, or weathering the Hunnic storms, they preserved their cultural identity through war, migration, and adaptation. These early centuries were formative, not yet the story of a nation, but of a people evolving. Languages were shaped, beliefs were exchanged, and out of the fire of conflict came the raw materials that would eventually forge a country. As the flicker of torches gave way to candlelight in ancient halls, and the sounds of iron and hooves quieted under starlit skies, the Germanic lands stood resilient, complex, diverse, and brimming with the seeds of empires yet to come. Our next chapter will explore that very transformation, as regional powers consolidate, kings rise, and the German people begin to build more than tribes, they build realms. Sleep well, and we'll continue the journey, with empire and expansion. The forests have quieted. The age of tribal migrations has given way to castles of stone and chapels filled with incense. Now, we arrive at a moment of forging, of empires carved not just by sword and crown, but by faith, diplomacy, and centuries of evolving identity. Germany, though not yet a united country, was now part of something grander, a sprawling patchwork of duchies, bishoprics, and kingdoms beneath the banner of the Holy Roman Empire. This was not a nation in the modern sense, but an empire of ideas, where emperors ruled with both sword and scepter, blessed by popes and burdened by politics. Let's breathe in the heavy scent of parchment and candle wax, and gently follow the slow rise of imperial Germany. Crown the birth of the Holy Roman Empire. After the death of Charlemagne in 814, his vast empire was divided among his heirs, fragmenting into smaller realms. The eastern portion, centered in what is now Germany, became the East Frankish Kingdom. Out of this Eastern Kingdom would arise the Holy Roman Empire, formally established in 962 CE, when Otto I, Duke of Saxony and King of East Francia, was crowned Holy Roman Emperor by Pope John XII. Otto's rule marked the beginning of the Ottonian dynasty, and his coronation symbolized a revival of Charlemagne's legacy. But this empire was not simply a continuation of Rome. It was uniquely medieval, deeply Germanic, and intertwined with the Catholic Church. It stretched from the North Sea to the Alps, from the Rhine to the Elbe. While the title suggested a rebirth of Rome, the Holy Roman Empire was distinctly decentralized. Power was fragmented among local princes, dukes, and bishops, many of whom wielded greater control over their territories than the emperor himself. Still, it was a unifying symbol, a German-led Christian empire at the heart of Europe. Castle the investiture controversy and imperial power. The close bond between emperor and pope was not without tension. One of the most significant conflicts of the medieval era was the investiture controversy, a bitter power struggle over who held the authority to appoint bishops and church officials, the emperor or the pope. At the center of this dispute was Henry IV, Holy Roman Emperor, and Pope Gregory VII. In 1076, after being excommunicated, Henry famously traveled barefoot across the snowy Alps to the castle of Canossa in 1077, begging the Pope for forgiveness, an event known as the Walk to Canossa. This moment symbolized the emperor's humbled position before the Church, but also exposed the ongoing tug-of-war between secular and spiritual power in the empire. Though temporary peace was made, the struggle continued for decades and ultimately limited imperial authority within Germany. Despite these internal tensions, the empire remained a powerful and influential force in European politics, culture, and religion. Shield, the Hohenstaufens, and the rise of imperial ambition. By the 12th century, the imperial crown passed to the Hohenstaufen dynasty, a family that produced some of the most ambitious rulers of the medieval German world. Chief among them was Frederick I Barbarossa, nicknamed for his magnificent red beard. Barbarossa sought to restore imperial dominance in both Germany and northern Italy. He led multiple military campaigns into the Italian peninsula, clashing with rebellious city-states and the papacy. Though charismatic and strong-willed, he ultimately failed to fully control Italy. Barbarossa's grandson Frederick II would go even further, a brilliant, multilingual ruler who presided over a cosmopolitan court in Sicily, challenged the Pope repeatedly, and was both admired and feared throughout Europe. But Frederick's long absences from Germany, due to his campaigns and governance in Italy, weakened imperial authority in the German heartland. His death in 1250 signaled the beginning of a period historians call the Great Interregnum, a time when no single emperor could effectively unite the empire. Balance scale, the fragmented empire. Unlike centralized kingdoms such as England or France, the Holy Roman Empire grew increasingly feudal and decentralized. German lands were ruled by hundreds of independent entities, duchies, bishoprics, free cities, and imperial knights. By the late medieval period, there were over 300 semi-autonomous territories within the empire. Some key players included the Duchy of Bavaria, the Electorate of Saxony, the Margraviate of Brandenburg, the Archbishopric of Mainz. The emperor, elected by a council of powerful prince-electors, was often more of a symbolic leader than a true monarch. Still, the empire provided a loose framework for unity and defense, and its cities flourished with trade, art, and religious scholarship. Cityscape, the Hanseatic League and urban power. While emperors and dukes jockeyed for influence, another force rose quietly: the cities. In northern Germany, trading hubs such as Lübeck, Hamburg, Bremen, and Rostock formed the Hanseatic League, a powerful commercial alliance that controlled trade across the Baltic and North Seas. Founded in the 12th century, the Hanseatic League grew into a confederation of over 200 towns. It dominated trade in timber, grain, furs, salt, and cloth. Ships from Hanseatic ports sailed to England, Scandinavia, and even Russia. The League operated its own fleet, negotiated with kings, and waged war when necessary. The rise of urban wealth challenged traditional feudal structures. Guilds flourished. Universities were founded. Gothic cathedrals stretched skyward. German cities became centers of innovation, learning, and growing self-rule. Church religion and the foundations of reform. By the 14th and 15th centuries, cracks were beginning to show in the foundation of the medieval order. While the Catholic Church remained central to life, voices of dissent began to stir. In places like Bohemia, now the Czech Republic, theologians such as Jan Hus questioned papal authority and wealth, laying early groundwork for the later Protestant Reformation. Within Germany, movements for spiritual renewal and ecclesiastical reform began to emerge. Monasteries debated theology. Preachers called for simpler faith. The printing press, developed by Johannes Gutenberg in Mainz around 1440, allowed ideas to spread like never before. These currents of change did not yet fracture the empire, but they signaled the coming of storms, social, religious, and political, that would define the next chapter of Germany's history. Dove, a tapestry of peoples and principalities. By the late 15th century, the Holy Roman Empire remained a tangle of cultures and kingdoms, a land of soaring cathedrals and dark forests, where knights rode alongside merchants and monks copied scripture in candlelight. The empire was not Germany as we know it today, but its core identity was undeniably German, shaped by language, landscape, and shared memory. From the Saxon plains to the Alpine valleys, people prayed, traded, and lived beneath the loose canopy of empire. Though divided, they were bound by something more than borders, a common history still unfolding. As night settles over stone castles and city spires, we prepare to journey next into a time of profound change. The people will rise. The church will splinter. And the empire will tremble. But for now, rest easy in the glow of medieval torches and whispered psalms. Our next chapter is resistance and rebellion. As twilight deepens across the valleys and steeples of medieval Germany, the calm of empire begins to shift. The air carries whispers now, of dissent, of protest, of voices rising against authority. Where once obedience flowed from altar to throne, now questions are being asked. And where questions rise, so too does resistance. This is the age of challenge. The centuries-old harmony between crown and church, between nobles and peasants, is about to be tested in fires both spiritual and social. And through it all, Germany will be the beating heart of rebellion, sacred, fierce, and transformative. Tonight, we enter a time of thunderous voices and broken certainties. But we'll move gently, letting the past unfold like worn pages in a well-loved book. Church Martin Luther and the Protestant Reformation. It begins with a hammer, a nail, and a door. In the year 1517, a German monk named Martin Luther, troubled by what he saw as corruption in the Catholic Church, posted his 95 Theses on the door of the castle church in Wittenberg. This act, quiet in the moment, would shake the world. Luther's protest was simple yet radical. He challenged the sale of indulgences, payments made to the Church in exchange for forgiveness of sins. But deeper still, he questioned the very structure of religious authority. Salvation, he argued, came not through priests or payment, but through faith alone. Luther's ideas spread rapidly, aided by Gutenberg's printing press, and soon churches, cities, and entire regions of the Holy Roman Empire began turning away from Rome. This movement, known as the Protestant Reformation, fractured the religious unity of Europe. Germany became its epicenter, a land divided not only by geography but by belief. Some princes embraced the new teachings, establishing Lutheran states. Others remained loyal to Catholicism. The result was a patchwork of spiritual allegiance, often overlapping and in conflict. The empire, already fragmented, now faced a deeper divide, one rooted in the soul. Shield, the Peasants' War, 1524 to 1525. Luther had hoped to reform the Church, not upend the social order. But once the fire of protest was lit, it spread beyond pulpits and sermons. In the early 1520s, the peasants of Germany, long burdened by feudal obligations, heavy taxes, and limited rights, saw in the Reformation a glimmer of hope. They believed that if spiritual freedom was possible, perhaps social freedom was too. Armed with slogans like, "The gospel makes all men free," tens of thousands of peasants across southern and central Germany rose in revolt. They demanded an end to serfdom, more just treatment from landlords, and the right to choose their own pastors. This uprising, known as the German Peasants' War, was one of the largest popular revolts in European history. But it was met with brutal suppression. Armies of nobles and princes crushed the rebellion, leaving an estimated 100,000 dead. Tragically, Luther himself denounced the revolt, siding with the rulers to maintain order. His words, once so empowering, now echoed with disappointment for many who had hoped for liberation. Still, the seeds had been sown. The idea that ordinary people could challenge authority, in faith, in society, would not die. Castle the Schmalkaldic War and Protestant Unity. As the Reformation continued to grow, Protestant princes formed alliances to protect their newfound faith. Chief among them was the Schmalkaldic League, a defensive coalition of Lutheran rulers who stood against the Catholic Emperor Charles V. In 1546, tensions exploded into the Schmalkaldic War, a conflict that pitted Protestant forces against the imperial army. Though initially defeated, the Protestants gained a powerful victory just a few years later with the Peace of Augsburg in 1555. This treaty granted German rulers the right to choose their territory's religion, Lutheran or Catholic, under the principle of cuius regio, ius religio, or whose realm, his religion. It was a temporary peace. Beneath the surface, the divisions remained. But it marked a significant recognition. Germany was no longer a land of singular faith. It had become a realm of competing truths. Dove, mystics, reformers, and radical thinkers. Not all resistance came through war or noble courts. Some of the most profound challenges to authority emerged in the quiet margins of society, in villages, in hidden gatherings, in the writings of mystics and radicals. Groups like the Anabaptists believed in adult baptism, rejecting the infant baptisms of both Catholics and Lutherans. They preached simplicity, pacifism, and the sharing of property. To many in power, these ideas were dangerous, not just spiritually but politically. In 1534, a radical faction seized the German city of Munster, proclaiming it a theocratic Anabaptist kingdom. The rebellion was eventually crushed in a bloody siege, but it showed how faith could fuel revolution, even when divorced from worldly ambition. Other thinkers, such as Thomas Müntzer, preached a fiery mix of apocalyptic vision and social justice, calling for both divine and earthly transformation. Though executed in the aftermath of the Peasants' War, his legacy lingered, a voice of the voiceless in a world of hierarchy. Fire the 30 Years' War, 1618 to 1648. By the early 17th century, the tensions between Catholic and Protestant states, between emperor and local rulers, had grown unbearable. What began as a religious dispute in Bohemia soon spiraled into the 30 Years' War, one of the most destructive conflicts in European history. Germany was the war's primary battleground. Over 3 decades, armies from across Europe marched through its lands. Towns were burned. Fields were ruined. Famine and plague followed. It's estimated that 1/3 of the German population perished. The war was not only about religion. It became a struggle for power, territory, and survival. Sweden, France, Spain, and the Habsburgs all took part, turning the Holy Roman Empire into a shattered landscape of violence and ruin. In 1648, the war finally ended with the Peace of Westphalia. This treaty redrew the map of Europe, strengthened the independence of German states, and allowed greater religious tolerance. But the damage was deep. Germany emerged from the war not as a unified nation, but as a broken mosaic of principalities, scarred, scattered, and soul-weary. Candle, the slow return of stability. In the wake of war, Germany entered a period of reconstruction and reflection. The Reformation had changed not only the church, but the culture. Art, music, and philosophy began to take new forms. Protestant composers like Johann Sebastian Bach created works of transcendent beauty. Universities grew in stature. Enlightenment ideas slowly took root, questioning not only theology but monarchy, reason, and human rights. Yet the wounds of rebellion, religious, social, and political, would take generations to heal. Germany remained divided, its people longing for a sense of unity, even as old divisions lingered. Tonight, we've walked through centuries of resistance, of faith questioned, of orders overturned, of people daring to hope for something more. In abbeys and battlefields, in sermons and songs, Germany's soul was tested again and again. But even in the storm, something remained, the will to believe, to speak, and to strive. And now, as we drift into quieter times, we prepare for the next part of our journey, the turning points that would shape the road to modern Germany. As we glide into the 18th and 19th centuries, a quiet restlessness begins to stir beneath Germany's layered landscapes, beneath the cobblestone cities, the patchwork of kingdoms, and the worn traditions of empire and church. The winds of change are gathering. Slowly at first, like a far-off tide, and then with the force of revolutions, unifications, and shifting borders. These are Germany's turning points, the events and decisions that would shape not just the nation, but the very concept of what it meant to be German. In this chapter, we walk softly through a world in motion, through war and industry, through dreamers and emperors, and through a long journey toward unity. Books, enlightenment, and the rise of thought. In the 18th century, while Germany remained politically fragmented into hundreds of duchies, kingdoms, and free cities, its cultural and intellectual life began to shine brightly. The German Enlightenment, or Aufklärung, blossomed in universities, salons, and quiet study halls. Thinkers like Immanuel Kant challenged humanity to dare to know, calling for reason, autonomy, and moral clarity. Others, like Johann Gottlieb Fichte, explored the nature of nationhood and identity, planting early seeds of nationalism. In literature and philosophy, figures such as Goethe, Schiller, and Herder crafted tales of personal struggle, spiritual longing, and heroic ideals. Their words would echo across Europe, shaping how generations viewed freedom, destiny, and the soul. And while the German lands remained divided, in spirit they were slowly beginning to coalesce, not yet as a state, but as a shared culture, rich in language, imagination, and vision. Crossed swords, the Napoleonic era, conquest and awakening. In the early 19th century, the silence of ideas gave way to the thunder of cannon. Napoleon Bonaparte, the French emperor, swept across Europe like a storm. In 1806, he dissolved the Holy Roman Empire, a 1,000-year-old institution that had once symbolized German unity, however loosely. His armies redrew borders, abolished feudal privileges, and imposed new codes of law. Many Germans resisted. Others, ironically, were inspired. Napoleon's conquests had a paradoxical effect. They awakened a German national consciousness. For the first time, people began to speak not just of Saxony or Bavaria or Prussia, but of Germany, as a shared homeland, a thing worth defending and dreaming of. Following Napoleon's defeat, the Congress of Vienna in 1815 created the German Confederation, a loose alliance of 39 German-speaking states. It was a compromise, order without unity, stability without passion. But the idea of a single united Germany had been born, and it would not fade. Factory: the Industrial Revolution. As the 19th century unfolded, Germany entered a new phase of transformation, not through war or philosophy, but through industry. Coal mines hummed in the Ruhr Valley. Railways snaked across the countryside, connecting cities and villages like never before. Ironworks and textile mills buzzed with innovation. Towns became cities. Farmers became factory workers. The very rhythm of life changed. This was the Industrial Revolution, and though it came to Germany slightly later than to Britain, it arrived with enormous force. Between 1850 and 1900, Germany went from a largely rural society to one of Europe's most dynamic economies. But this rapid growth came with costs: urban crowding, harsh working conditions, child labor, and deepening class divides. These tensions gave rise to new political movements, including socialism, which called for better rights, fairer wages, and more humane conditions for the growing working class. At the same time, the industrial boom strengthened the power of the Kingdom of Prussia, which was rapidly becoming the engine of German ambition. Shield, Otto von Bismarck, and the path to unification. At the center of Germany's most decisive turning point stood a man with a sharp mind, a cold realism, and a bold vision. Otto von Bismarck, the Iron Chancellor of Prussia. Bismarck believed that German unification would not come through debates or dreams, but through what he called blood and iron. His strategy: use diplomacy and war to isolate rivals, rally the German states, and forge a new empire. In the 1860s, he orchestrated a series of wars. First, with Denmark over Schleswig and Holstein. Then, with Austria in the Austro-Prussian War, eliminating Austria's influence over German affairs. And finally, in 1870, a conflict with France, the Franco-Prussian War, which stirred a surge of nationalist pride among the German people. The plan worked. In 1871, inside the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles, the German princes proclaimed Wilhelm I of Prussia as emperor of a unified German empire. Germany, once a patchwork of feudal lands and duchies, had become a modern nation-state, powerful, industrialized, and ambitious. But beneath the triumph, tensions lingered, between conservatives and socialists, Catholics and Protestants, old nobility and new capitalists. Bismarck worked tirelessly to balance these forces, banning socialist parties one day, creating social insurance programs the next. He kept the peace in Europe for decades. But peace, like power, can be fleeting. Globe showing Europe, Africa, Germany on the world stage. By the end of the 19th century, Germany was not just a unified state, it was an empire eager to stake its place among the great powers of the world. Under Kaiser Wilhelm II, who dismissed Bismarck in 1890, Germany embarked on a path of militarization and colonial ambition. It built a navy to rival Britain's, claimed overseas territories in Africa and the Pacific, and pushed for greater influence on the world stage. At home, rapid urbanization and industrial growth continued, transforming German cities into modern marvels. Berlin, in particular, became a cultural and scientific hub, a place of opera houses, universities, laboratories, and innovation. Yet beneath the optimism lay an unease. Alliances were forming across Europe. Old rivalries festered, and nationalism, once a force for unity, was becoming a source of tension, fear, and pride. Germany had turned many corners. But ahead, shadows loomed. Compass a moment of pause. In just over a century, Germany had moved from fragmented duchies to a unified empire. From philosophers in candlelit rooms to steel foundries that lit the skies. From local loyalties to a national identity. These were the turning points, sharp bends in the river of history. Each shaped by ambition and struggle, by invention and rebellion. Together, they built the foundation of the modern German state. And now, as we leave this chapter and drift into the quiet hours, we prepare to hear the next set of voices, not from emperors or generals, but from the people themselves. Because in the next segment, we'll listen to the people's voices, how ordinary Germans lived, loved, worked, and hoped through all this change. In the grand sweep of Germany's history, with its empires and revolutions, its philosophers and chancellors, it's easy to lose sight of the quieter stories. The ones that unfold in kitchens and marketplaces, in train cars and tenements, in wheat fields and whispered songs at bedtime. This is the story not of kings or conquests, but of the German people themselves. Their voices were many: farmers and factory workers, poets and protesters, soldiers and school teachers. Through centuries of change, they carried their traditions, struggles, and dreams in the gentle rhythm of daily life. So now, let us step back from the halls of power. Let's listen instead to the voices that often go unheard, the ones that echo not in history books, but in lullabies, letters, and lantern-lit evenings across the German countryside. Basket village rhythms and folk traditions. For much of Germany's past, most people lived in small rural communities, surrounded by fields and forests. Here, life followed the seasons, sowing and harvesting, festivals and fasts. People grew their own food, bartered in local markets, and relied on neighbors as family. Women often worked alongside men in the fields and kept households humming with practical wisdom passed down through generations. Folk songs filled the air during work and play, songs of love, loss, mischief, and the mysteries of the woods. Tales from the Brothers Grimm, collected in the early 1800s, were not merely bedtime stories. They were cultural heirlooms, reflecting the fears, hopes, and humor of the people. Village customs, such as Maibaum, maypole dances, carnival, and harvest festivals, connected communities through celebration and shared memory. Even during difficult times, poor harvests, war, or disease, these rituals offered comfort and continuity. Religion, too, was central to village life. Church bells marked the hours. Sunday services provided both spiritual grounding and a place to gather, reflect, and find peace amid life's burdens. Hammer and wrench, the workers' world, factories and urban life. By the mid-19th century, Germany was transforming rapidly. And so too were the lives of its people. Millions left their ancestral villages behind, drawn to the booming industrial cities like Berlin, Hamburg, Leipzig, and Essen. With coal-stained hands and soot-darkened lungs, they worked long hours in the clamor of textile mills, iron foundries, and rail yards. Housing was often cramped, rows of apartment blocks with shared toilets and little ventilation. Yet even in these gray spaces, life continued with resilience. Children played in courtyards. Mothers stitched clothes by candlelight. Families saved pennies for books, for beer on weekends, or for schooling their young. Labor movements began to take root. Workers joined trade unions or supported the Social Democratic Party, SPD, demanding fair wages, shorter hours, and better conditions. These weren't just political causes, they were the everyday hopes of people who wanted dignity in their labor and safety for their families. For many, life in the city brought new opportunities: public schools, music halls, museums, and streetcars. Yet the divide between rich and poor remained stark, and the working class continued to carry much of the burden of industrial progress. Thread women at the heart of life. Whether in the countryside or the city, German women were the quiet backbone of daily life. In rural homes, they managed entire households, cooking over open fires, preserving food, raising children, and tending animals. In towns and cities, many worked in textile factories, as domestic servants, or as shopkeepers in local markets. Education for girls was often limited, especially before the late 19th century. But women found other ways to pass down knowledge, through stories, herbal remedies, embroidery patterns, and songs. These informal networks of wisdom kept communities rooted. During times of war or economic hardship, women stepped further into public life. They ran farms while their husbands were away. They organized soup kitchens, cared for the wounded, and, eventually, began to demand rights of their own. By the early 1900s, voices like Clara Zetkin and Louise Otto Peters began calling for women's suffrage, education reform, and equality. Though change came slowly, the seeds of Germany's feminist movement were planted in the lived experiences of everyday women. Luggage migration and dreams of elsewhere. Not all Germans stayed. From the 1830s through the early 20th century, waves of migration carried millions across the Atlantic, seeking freedom and opportunity in the Americas, especially the United States. They left behind tight-knit communities and familiar dialects for unknown cities, prairies, and promise. Some fled poverty or political repression. Others sought religious freedom or simply the chance to own land. These migrants carried pieces of Germany with them: language, recipes, family Bibles, and songs. They built neighborhoods known as Little Germanies, opened bakeries and churches, and influenced the cultural landscape of their new homes. Yet even as they became Americans, Brazilians, or Argentinians, their hearts often remained tied to the places they left behind: the forests of Thuringia, the vineyards of the Rhineland, the snowy rooftops of Bavaria. Back in Germany, families marked their calendars by the arrival of letters, full of stories, promises, and sometimes money to help others follow. Brain, the power of education and thought. Throughout the 19th century, Germany became a beacon of education and scholarship. The state increasingly supported public schools, literacy rates soared, and a tradition of rigorous, structured learning took hold. For many German families, schooling became a path to upward mobility, a way to rise above hardship and give their children a better future. Universities in cities like Heidelberg, Göttingen, and Berlin attracted students from around the world. German scientists and inventors made breakthroughs in chemistry, engineering, and medicine. Thinkers like Max Weber, Hermann von Helmholtz, and Wilhelm Wundt advanced fields that would shape modern life. Ordinary people took pride in this legacy of learning, reading newspapers, attending lectures, and debating ideas in cafes and beer halls. Education wasn't just for elites. It was seen as a national virtue, a source of strength and renewal. Performing arts, culture, music, and the German soul. Amid work and hardship, Germans also nurtured a deep love for music, art, and storytelling. Families gathered around the piano to sing Lieder. Children learned to play the violin. Choirs practiced for church and town festivals. The music of Beethoven, Brahms, and Wagner stirred hearts and reminded people that beauty could exist even in troubled times. Theater troupes performed Goethe's plays in city auditoriums and small-town stages. Painters captured pastoral scenes, while craftsmen created intricate wood carvings, clocks, and tapestries. Christmas, with its twinkling lights, gingerbread, and carols, held a special place in the German imagination. It was a time when even the poorest households tried to gather, to celebrate, and to hold on to joy. For the average German, culture was not a luxury, it was a necessity, a way to endure, a way to connect, a way to remember who they were. Package wartime and the people's burden. By the early 20th century, as tensions rose across Europe, the German people once again faced uncertainty. The build-up to World War I brought patriotic fervor, but also anxiety. Young men were conscripted. Families worried. Food prices rose. And when war finally broke out in 1914, it swept through every corner of German life. At home, civilians endured rationing, air raids, and immense emotional strain. Letters from the front were treasured and feared. Women stepped into roles once reserved for men, keeping factories, hospitals, and homes running. As the war dragged on, hope faded. By its end in 1918, the German Empire had collapsed, and the country faced famine, revolution, and economic ruin. And yet, even in defeat, the people carried on. Sunrise echoes of ordinary lives. The story of Germany has often been told through borders and battles. But listen closely, and you'll hear a softer chorus, of grandmothers stirring soup in blackened kettles, of miners returning home in twilight, of students reciting poetry in unheated classrooms. These are the people's voices. Resilient, grounded, hopeful, even in hardship. They remind us that history is not just what happens in palaces or parliaments. It is also the hush of a lullaby, the crackle of a wood stove, the careful folding of a letter home. And now, as night deepens around us, we prepare to step into the next chapter, one of modern struggles, where Germany faces its darkest trials, and its long path to healing. As the dust settled after the First World War, Germany stood at a crossroads, wounded, weary, and uncertain. The once mighty empire had vanished, leaving behind a republic full of promise and peril. In this chapter of Germany's story, we enter the heart of the 20th century, a time of revolutions and recessions, of walls rising and falling, of darkness and redemption. Through all the storms, the German people endured. They faced grief, guilt, rebuilding, and renewal, all while navigating questions of identity in a rapidly changing world. Now, gently, let us unfold these modern struggles, layer by layer, like pages from a long and painful chapter, where the past was never far, and the future always just beyond reach. Tornado, the fragile dream, the Weimar Republic. In 1919, a new hope emerged, the Weimar Republic, Germany's first attempt at a full democratic government. Born in the small city of Weimar, it was a bold and fragile experiment. The Republic promised freedom of speech, voting rights for all adults, and cultural openness. For a moment, cities like Berlin bloomed with creativity. Painters like George Gross, filmmakers like Fritz Lang, and composers like Kurt Weill redefined modern art and music. But behind the glamour was instability. Germany was weighed down by war reparations from the Treaty of Versailles, causing inflation so severe that paper money became worthless. A loaf of bread could cost billions of marks. People carried wages in wheelbarrows and bartered clothes for potatoes. Unemployment soared. Political tensions rose. On one side stood communists, on the other, radical right-wing groups who blamed Jews, leftists, and foreign powers for Germany's decline. The Weimar years were marked by a dizzying back and forth between chaos and culture, progress and panic. And in that uncertainty, darker forces began to stir. Whole descent into darkness, the rise of the Nazis. In 1933, the world shifted dramatically. Adolf Hitler and his National Socialist German Workers' Party, the Nazis, seized power through a mix of legal maneuvering and brutal violence. To many struggling Germans, the Nazis promised strength, stability, and national pride. But their rise marked the beginning of one of the darkest chapters in human history. Hitler quickly dismantled democracy. Civil liberties vanished. Political opponents were jailed or killed. Joseph Goebbels' propaganda machine flooded homes with lies and fear. Jews, Roma, disabled people, LGBTQ individuals, and others were targeted. Discrimination became law. Hate became policy. Germany became a tightly controlled police state. Children joined the Hitler Youth. Books were burned. Dissent was crushed. And beneath it all, plans were being laid for expansion, for war, and for genocide. Bomb world at war again. In 1939, Hitler invaded Poland. The world erupted into World War II. Germany's armies swept through Europe with terrifying speed. But the war would not stay distant. Soon, bombs fell on German cities. Families huddled in bunkers. Streets turned to rubble. Millions of soldiers died. Millions more civilians endured terror, starvation, and grief. The entire nation was pulled into the machinery of war. And in hidden camps, behind barbed wire and locked doors, the Holocaust unfolded. 6 million Jews, along with millions of others, were murdered in a systematic campaign of extermination. Trains carried people to death camps like Auschwitz, where gas chambers replaced humanity. Not all Germans agreed. Some resisted, quietly, courageously. The White Rose, a student group, distributed anti-Nazi leaflets. Individuals like Dietrich Bonhoeffer and Sophie Scholl gave their lives to speak out. But the cost of silence and the power of fear left a lasting scar. By 1945, Germany lay in ruins. Cities were flattened. Millions were dead. The Nazi regime was gone, but its crimes would echo across generations. Dove, divided and occupied. After the war, Germany did not find peace, at least not right away. The Allied powers, the United States, Britain, France, and the Soviet Union, divided Germany into zones. Berlin, though deep inside Soviet-controlled territory, was also divided. Soon, tensions between East and West hardened into the Cold War. In 1949, Germany split in two. West Germany, the Federal Republic of Germany, aligned with the West. East Germany, the German Democratic Republic, controlled by the Soviet Union. Families were separated. Travel was restricted. Trust frayed. The most visible symbol of this division came in 1961, when the Berlin Wall was built, slicing the city in half. Guard towers, barbed wire, death strips. The wall was not just concrete, It was heartbreak. Those in the East faced heavy surveillance under the Stasi. Dissenters were imprisoned or silenced. Yet daily life continued. People fell in love, went to work, raised children, and held on to hope. In the West, Germany rebuilt quickly with U.S. aid. Its economy surged. It embraced democracy. But guilt over the past and anxiety over the future remained close at hand. Brick the wall falls. For 4 long decades, Germany remained divided. 2 nations, 2 systems, 2 truths. But the 1980s brought winds of change. Across Eastern Europe, people demanded freedom. And in East Germany, protests grew, peaceful, persistent, powerful. Then, one cold night in November 1989, the impossible happened. The Berlin Wall opened. Crowds flooded the checkpoints. Families reunited. Strangers embraced. People danced atop the wall that once divided them. With tears and laughter, the people began tearing it down, piece by piece, memory by memory. It was not just a political moment. It was deeply human. A release of decades of fear, longing, and quiet courage. In 1990, Germany officially reunited. For the first time since the war, the German people were whole again. Brain reconciling the past. After reunification, Germany faced a new struggle: how to live with its past. Unlike many nations, Germany made a conscious choice to remember. Monuments to Holocaust victims were erected in city centers. Museums told painful truths. School children studied the crimes of the Nazi era with honesty. Laws banned hate speech and Nazi symbols. Public figures apologized. Survivors were honored. Germany did not erase its darkest history. It turned toward it with humility, responsibility, and resolve. At the same time, reunification brought economic challenges. East Germany had fallen behind. Factories closed. Unemployment rose. Some felt left behind in the new Germany. Bridging that divide, not just economically, but emotionally, became a national project. A new identity. Germany of the late 20th and early 21st centuries began forging a new identity. It became a leader in European unity, a supporter of human rights, and a champion of green energy and social responsibility. But modern Germany was also more diverse than ever. In the decades following World War II, millions of guest workers, especially from Turkey, Italy, and Yugoslavia, had come to help rebuild. These communities, along with growing populations from the Middle East, Africa, and Asia, transformed Germany's cities into multicultural centers. Yet integration was not always easy. Tensions flared. Far-right groups occasionally re-emerged. And Germany once again found itself confronting questions of who belongs and what it means to be German. Still, the country pushed forward, holding fast to the lessons of its past while welcoming a more global future. Compass: a country still healing. Germany's modern struggles are not over. Like any nation, it faces economic shifts, political debates, and the challenges of climate change, digital transformation, and migration. But perhaps its greatest strength now lies in its willingness to face hardship, openly, critically, and collectively. The journey from empire to dictatorship, from ruin to resilience, is not an easy one. But it is a journey the German people have walked, step by step, word by word, decade by decade. And so, as the night deepens and the story slows, we remember not just the struggles, but the spirit that carried the people through. The hands that rebuilt broken homes. The voices that protested in whispers and in song. The hearts that chose compassion over hate. Germany's modern struggles are chapters of pain and growth, woven into the broader tapestry of a nation that has learned, endured, and begun again. Now, let us drift toward dawn, toward a Germany reborn and reimagined. A land of rivers and reason, of forests and forward thinking. In the next segment, we'll step into the present moment, to see the land today, the Germany of now, shaped by its people, history, and hopes. As we enter the gentle present, we find Germany standing proud and poised, a land where ancient forests meet vibrant cities, where centuries of history blend with the hum of modern life. Today's Germany is a tapestry woven from its rich past and its dynamic present, a place of cultural diversity, innovation, and natural beauty. Tonight, let us take a slow journey through this land as it is now, its landscapes, people, culture, and spirit, all seen through a calm, restful lens. The geography and natural beauty. Germany lies in the heart of Europe, stretching from the rolling hills of the Rhineland in the west to the gentle shores of the Baltic and North Seas in the north, from the fertile plains of the North German plain to the majestic peaks of the Bavarian Alps in the south. Its terrain is varied. Dense forests like the famous Black Forest, Schwarzwald, whisper tales of old legends. The winding Rhine River has carried goods and stories for thousands of years, and the peaceful lakes of Mecklenburg and Bavaria offer places of quiet reflection. Protected areas like the Bavarian Forest National Park and Harz Mountains remind visitors and residents alike of nature's enduring presence, a constant companion to the hustle and bustle of city life. Germany's commitment to environmental stewardship is strong. The country is a global leader in renewable energy, with wind turbines spinning in the north and solar panels spreading across fields and rooftops. Cityscape cities of history and innovation. From medieval towns to cutting-edge metropolises, Germany's cities blend old and new in harmonious rhythm. Berlin, the capital, is a symbol of resilience and creativity. Once divided, now united, it boasts historic landmarks like the Brandenburg Gate and Reichstag Parliament Building, alongside vibrant art scenes, cafes, and startups. Its streets hum with diversity and ideas. Munich, in Bavaria, offers a rich blend of tradition and modernity. It is known for its Oktoberfest, Baroque architecture, and world-class museums. Nearby lie the Alps, perfect for hiking and skiing. Hamburg, with its vast harbor, connects Germany to the world. It is a city of music, maritime heritage, and lively markets. Cologne boasts the stunning Cologne Cathedral, a masterpiece of Gothic architecture and a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Smaller towns, like Heidelberg and Rothenburg ob der Tauber, keep the spirit of old Germany alive with cobbled streets, timbered houses, and centuries-old castles. Each city carries its own rhythm, its own stories, but all are linked by the German commitment to quality of life, culture, and community. Busts in silhouette people and society. Germany is home to over 83 million people, a blend of native Germans and immigrants who together create a rich social fabric. The country has embraced multiculturalism while grappling with the challenges it brings. Languages from Turkish to Arabic, Italian to Polish, are spoken alongside German in neighborhoods, schools, and marketplaces. Education remains a cornerstone. Germany's strong apprenticeship programs combine classroom learning with practical skills, helping young people enter the workforce confidently. Social welfare programs provide support for healthcare, unemployment, and pensions, reflecting a societal belief in caring for one another. Community festivals, like Carnival in Cologne or the Christmas markets across the country, bring people together in shared joy and tradition. Graduation cap culture, arts, and innovation. Germany's cultural life pulses with creativity, from classical music to contemporary art. The legacies of Beethoven, Bach, and Brahms continue to inspire. The country hosts numerous music festivals, opera houses, and theaters. Modern German artists and filmmakers explore diverse themes, reflecting both history and the future. Germany's contribution to science and technology remains significant. Its universities and research centers lead in fields like engineering, renewable energy, and medicine. The country's famed autobahns symbolize precision and progress, while companies like Siemens, Volkswagen, and Bayer stand as global leaders. Fork and knife with plate, food and traditions. German cuisine reflects its regional variety and hearty spirit. From Bavarian pretzels and bratwurst to sauerbraten and Black Forest cake, food is both comfort and celebration. Seasonal traditions like the Advent Christmas markets light up towns with crafts, music, and warm mulled wine, inviting a moment of calm and community. Globe showing Europe, Africa, Germany in the world today. As a key member of the European Union and a global economic power, Germany plays a vital role in international affairs. It champions diplomacy, human rights, and environmental policies. Germany's history, both proud and painful, informs its commitment to peace and cooperation. Tonight, as we close this glimpse into today's Germany, we rest in the quiet strength of a nation shaped by centuries, its people, land, and spirit entwined in a calm harmony. Soon, we will turn our gaze to the future, hopes and dreams for Germany's tomorrow. As night deepens and we come to the gentle close of Germany's long and winding story, it is time to look ahead, to the hopes and dreams that carry this nation softly into the future. Germany's journey has been filled with trials and triumphs, shadows and light. And yet, it is the quiet determination of its people, the patient weaving of history and hope, that offers a path forward. So tonight, as you settle deeper into calm, we'll explore the visions Germany holds for tomorrow, a future shaped by renewal, unity, innovation, and care. Seedling a green future. Germany has taken bold steps to address the urgent challenges of our time, especially climate change. The Energiewende, or energy transition, is a national plan to move away from fossil fuels and nuclear power toward renewable sources like wind, solar, and hydroelectric energy. Wind farms ripple across the northern plains and offshore in the Baltic Sea. Solar panels glint on rooftops from city to countryside. Germany invests heavily in sustainable technologies, aiming to be carbon neutral by 2045. This commitment reflects a deep-rooted respect for the natural world, a desire to preserve the forests, rivers, and clean air that have long been part of Germany's identity. Houses, embracing diversity. Germany's people continue to grow more diverse, bringing new languages, cultures, and perspectives. Cities bustle with communities from around the globe, weaving new threads into the national fabric. Efforts to promote integration and inclusion seek to build understanding and unity, with schools teaching multiple languages, festivals celebrating different heritages, and dialogues fostering empathy. The hope is a Germany where everyone belongs, where diversity is seen not as a challenge but as a strength. Brain innovation and education. Education remains a beacon of hope. Germany invests in its schools, universities, and apprenticeships, preparing young minds for a world of rapid technological change. Fields like artificial intelligence, biotechnology, and green engineering hold promise for new discoveries and opportunities. At the same time, Germany cherishes its cultural heritage. Music, literature, and philosophy continue to inspire generations. Handshake, peace, and cooperation. Having experienced the devastation of war, Germany is deeply committed to peace. It plays a key role in the European Union, promoting cooperation and shared values across nations. Germany also works with global partners to address crises, support human rights, and foster sustainable development. National Park, caring for the land and its people. Germany's future is also one of care, for the environment and for its citizens. Programs supporting healthcare, social welfare, and community development continue to ensure that no one is left behind. From bustling cities to quiet villages, the focus is on building strong, healthy communities where people can thrive. Glowing Star, a nation of quiet strength. Germany's history teaches a profound lesson. True strength often lies not in loud declarations or swift conquests, but in patience, reflection, and resilience. It is in the willingness to face the past honestly, to rebuild with care, and to dream with open hearts. As we drift toward sleep, we can carry this image of Germany forward, a nation growing gently, thoughtfully, toward a hopeful tomorrow. Thank you for joining me on this calm journey through Germany's history, its land, and its spirit. If you've enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to Sleepy Time History, where each night we explore the world's stories with a gentle voice and open heart. Until next time, rest well, and may your dreams be filled with peaceful stories from across the globe. Good night.